Here's a quick video to show you how to create the LWS Sewn Adaptive Bomber Jacket into a sleeveless vest version. Just like the regular version, adaptive or standard, before you start any construction, you want to do your welt pockets, any embroidery, or add any of your patches before you start the construction. Also, like the original version, prep all your collars, cuffs, waistband to placket before you get started. The only pieces you're going to omit are the upper sleeve and the lower sleeve for both lining and self fabric. Start by sewing the front facings to the front lining. Then you're going to sew together the front pieces of the jacket to the back at the shoulders, 1/2 inch seam allowance. Then you're going to baste the collar between the notches at center front to the neckline of the jacket. Sew the front facing and lining to the back lining at the shoulder seams, 1/2 inch seam allowance. Then you're going to open it up and you're going to lay these pieces on top of your self fabric that is already put together the same way. At each arm's eye, you are going to stitch about 2 inches up around the arm's eye, stopping about 2 inches before on both arm's eyes of your vest. Now you will sew the neckline, all the layers together at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and you're going to sew from the top of center front halfway down, leaving the last 4 inches, basically everything below the notch mark, open. So the arm's eye looks like this. You see how I left the last 2 inches open on the back as well as the front at the side seams, and you leave the side seams open completely. Sew the arm's eye a 1/2 inch from point to point. You're going to trim the bulk of the neckline down, and then you're going to clip around the neckline curve all the way around. You're also going to clip the points at center front. Now you're going to turn the jacket right side out, going through the side seam and up through the shoulders, pulling everything out so that the lining is on the inside and the self fabric is on the outside. You want to be sure and push the points out at center front at the edge of your collars. Now you're going to line up your side seams of your self fabric, your outside fabric, on both sides. So you put the right sides together, leaving the lining free, pin it, and sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance down each side. Now that both side seams are sewn, you can press these seams open, especially if you want to put trim down the side seams like I did for this vest. So you measure the amount you need for both sides and you apply that, covering exactly center over the seam and top stitching it down. Do this on both edges of your trim, making sure to keep the lining free from where you're sewing. And you're going to do it from the bottom of the arm's eye all the way down to the bottom of the jacket. So now your outer side seams are closed and your shoulders have the trim, as well as your side seam has the trim. You still have an opening at the bottom of the arm's eye. We'll address that in a minute. But now you're going to go to your side seams of your lining. And on one side, you're going to stitch down and stop. You're going to leave an opening, and then you're going to stitch again and go all the way down to the bottom of the lining. On the opposite side, you're going to stitch all the way down from the bottom of the arm's eye to the bottom of the jacket. All of this is a 1/2 inch seam allowance. You should have already sewn your placket to your waistband rib knit. Now you're going to place that on the bottom edge of the outer part of your jacket. You're going to line it up at center front and on the all the way to the opposite side at center front, and you're going to sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way across. So now your placket and waistband are attached to the bottom of the jacket. You can see that the side seams are sewn, leaving the hole open there for you to be able to get into from the inside. Once we attach the lining to the waistband, the opposite side is completely closed. Now we're going to sew close that opening that we left at the side seams at the bottom of the arm's eye. So you match up the side seam of the lining to the side seam of the outer self fabric. You pin that in place, and then you're going to close it up from where the stitching stops, like I just showed you. And you're going to do this on both sides of the underarms, and now your armholes will be completely sewn and everything is concealed from the inside, having your sleeveless arms be fully lined. Now your armholes are fully enclosed. I usually go and give it a good press on both armholes. And now we're ready to attach the inside lining to the bottom of the waistband. And we're going to do that by going through the hole that we left open in the side of the lining. You're going to grab the facing at the right side and grab the right side of the placket that is still left free, and you're going to pull it through that hole. You're going to line up the center front corners of the facing and the placket, and you'll pin that in place, and you'll basically pull the entire distance of the bottom of the jacket out through that hole, and you're going to sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way across that bottom edge where the lining meets the placket and the rib knit. So now you can see I've attached the lining to the rib knit waistband, 1/2 inch all the way around. And now you're going to pull out through the same hole the center fronts. Remember, we left that half of the center front facing and the front open. So now it's open from the notch point basically down to the placket. So we pull that out completely, and we're going to close that up. So start on one side and continue the stitching all the way down through the placket, and the same for the other side. Doing all of this, pulling it through that hole that we've left in the side seam. Still having that bottom waistband pulled through the hole in the lining, you're going to clip the points at the very bottom of your placket, and you're going to do that on both sides. You're going to push the placket point in, and you're going to meet up the rib knit waistband selvages just after the placket, and you're going to meet it up all the way across the entire waistband. You're going to pin that in place all the way down, and then on the other side, same thing, clip the corner and push the point out, line up the seams where the placket attaches to the waistband, and on the seam allowance, you're going to baste through all of the seam allowance, 1/4 inch, all the way across. So now you're going to turn the jacket right side out through that same opening in the lining side seam, and you're going to pull the waistband out that we just basted together on the inside. You're going to make sure that the point of the placket is all turned out on both sides. making sure that everything is flat. I go and give it a good press down center front, down the waistband. I'll press the lining up at the waistband. And then your jacket is basically done. All the rest of the construction is the same that you do for the jacket. At this point, after I press it, I will top stitch it starting at center back at the neck, come around the neck, down the center front, through the placket, across the bottom of the placket, and up the placket till it meets where the jacket body begins. Then you mark your closures, and last step is you sew the hole closed in your lining. And now you have a sleeveless bomber, a vest.